If your brother's west of the river, he's gone.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him.
Hello, and welcome to our The Last of Us HBO Spoilercast, where each week we'll be reacting to the latest episode and talking in depth about what we've watched. I'm Phil, or AK Black and Red, and on this channel I talk about The Last of Us a lot, along with Resident Evil and other survival horror themed games. So if that's your thing, be sure to subscribe. This week I'm joined once again by Dee, my wife, who's also a slam poet, sex blogger, and PhD researcher, and the creator of the amazing Animal Crossing Resident Evil themed island. And
Right.
Will, who runs Resident Evil Central on Twitter, the largest Resident Evil fan account, and co-host for the Horror Game of the Year Awards, which we've now wrapped up for this year, but we will return next year. You can be sure of that. As the name implies, spoilers lie ahead for up to the 6th episode of the HBO series, so if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you do before you watch this. And you don't have to have played the game to follow along, but be aware that we will be talking about where the game up to this point in the story, up to the end of episode 6. So there will be spoilers in that sense if you haven't played it. But given that it's the TV show, it should be the same plot point. So hopefully no big surprises. But with that out the way, let's dive in and talk about it. So let's start off with our overall impressions of the episode, as usual, and what we felt, our general review, and anything particular that we want to talk about. So last week I picked Dee to go first, so this week I'm going to pick Will.
Okay. Yeah, no, with this episode, it's all the emotional build-up that we've had throughout what everyone's experienced, and you can see it now starting to bubble up, and the real decisions that they're now having to make are quite integral to the story, so you can see how it's impacting them and how they're going to move forward from it. So it was definitely a really good episode, and yeah, I look forward to obviously next week's one.
In poetry, we call it the turn, and it really was right. Will's right about that whole build-up. At some point, they had to join us in the crying, because it was not on that they expected us to weep by ourselves. And this whole build-up had to explode somewhere, and it ended up with them making decisions and saying, okay, we know where we're at. No more hiding. And I loved that. It was emotionally vulnerable and beautifully shot as ever.
Yep. And it feels like this week is kind of where we saw a lot of we've seen that kind of growth of Joel and Ellie's relationship, and it hit that point of I'm searching for the right word, where there's like, obviously they at the end they kind of reach who they are together and depending on each other and relying on each other, but also there's that moment beforehand and that conflict where it almost looks like it's all going to fall apart, obviously with the scene which was the ranch house in the game, and it's just, I think, a random house in Jackson, but the same sort of scene. So yeah, I think that was big, but I think the thing that stood out for me most about it, that I think cemented this as more than just, oh yeah, this covered all these basic plot beats in the game, and it was broadly the same without the actual gameplay bits, which made it kind of above that, was the characterization of Joel in particular. And I think the fact that, because you can't do that in gameplay with a protagonist who's like, you've got to appease the gamer who's behind the controller, so you've got to have lots of, like, going around and killing lots of enemies, so you can't have them stop dead and have a panic attack in the middle, because that would kind of ruin the flow of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be able to work it into a mechanic if you're really like clever with it, but I think that would be a bit difficult. But in the show, obviously you can do that more, and it's obviously, he doesn't say I'm having a panic attack. He doesn't say I've got PTSD or any of this sort of stuff. But you see it, and Pedro Pascal's performance in that is just absolutely spot on. I feel like in their moments you can feel like his performance, the way they do the music, and the sort of everything goes a little bit blurry, and the sort of that you can feel that as it's happening. And I think he's done that absolutely superbly. Like that, you couldn't give a better performance to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, for me, it was when he was sat with Tommy. And weirdly enough, this is the first episode where I didn't cry. I think when Joel started to cry, I went all mummy, not as in mummy, sorry, mummy, step on your neck type mummy. But it was more of a like, come here, my child, come and be like held to my bosom while you weep. So maybe a bit of mummy, I don't know. But the mum instinct kicked in, not in a Lady Dimitrescu way, like more in like, though I have cosplayed the Lady Dimitrescu.
I know what you were trying to say. I was just taking a moment to process so many different images that were just coming.
Maternal instinct. So let's get it that way.
Yeah.
My maternal instinct kicked in, and I just wanted to soothe and comfort him. I thought that he was very short-sighted, where he was expecting Tommy to just get up and leave because he'd asked him to, where he hadn't really considered what was going on with Tommy. And can I just say as well, I love that it's canon that both Tommy and Joel like the dark meat. Sarah is obviously mixed race. Tommy's married to a black woman. Like, boom. Like, black Twitter and black TikTok, we're all loving it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just comment. Like, I can't obviously comment on any of that. Far too white for that. But just on the performances and stuff, and I think that point, we'll obviously talk in more depth about specific points. But yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to kind of shout out in performance besides Pedro Pascal's, I mean, Gabriel Luna did a great job as Tommy. Everyone in the cast did, but Ellie delivering those lines that we've seen before in, like, they're all pretty much line for line game cutscene recreations, like and I think I remember when there was like that short burst of dialogue where she says, "Everyone I've ever loved has either died or left me." And obviously that line is quite calm before she goes into that, like she pushes him and then starts like emoting. And I think because that was included in the trailer, like everyone was kind of like, "Oh, that doesn't sound very good delivery," and like there were a few criticisms of that, but once we hear it in full in context, that was just like the emotion and outpouring in that scene and the end scene where she's kind of begging Joel to get up and everything. Like, again, I've said it before, but you can feel the strength of her performance as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. That shot with the horse in the sun.
Yeah, although there
was some beautiful shots in this.
The horse, obviously, at the end, I don't know if you know, I didn't notice when we watched it the first time, but I've seen loads of people pointing it out since. As it pans out, it's a prop horse because it doesn't move. For some reason, like, so people have been pointing out that they've just, rather than leave the real horse in, they've used the prop horse. That doesn't affect my, like, that's like, oh, well, it was a 10 out of 10 episode. Now it's like 5 out of 10 because didn't use a real horse. Worst episode ever. Nothing like that. But
no, I don't know how people notice these things, because I saw some other pictures of people saw like camera crew.
Yeah, on the big sort of helicopter wide shot.
Yeah.
And then like in the corner by the probably, I would never have noticed that. And like
I did not spot them at all, but then when you actually see the picture and there's like, it's like 3 or 4 people, and you're like, how did I not notice that? But I think that's the power of the episode, is that that's not what you're concentrating on, is it? It's the following them and following their story. So
yeah, I mean, we'll have to like at some point go through all that, because I always like that stuff after the fact, when like the second viewing or third viewing of stuff. And I think we've done it when we've been rewatching Supernatural. Like you'll just notice like a camera crew or someone sitting in the background. You're just like, hold on,
who's that?
But that's because you've watched it enough times that you don't need to pay attention as much to like the main center of the scene, and now you're just sort of like, these other details pop up. You're like, that's not a person in the scene. You shouldn't be there.
No, that's very, very true. And I'm looking forward to seeing it a second and a third and a fourth time. I really am. But I don't know if I'm going to be still being able to see things like camera crew in the foliage, because every time I see any of it, clips or any of it, I'm just absolutely immersed in what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely immersed. Like the bit that got me, I think, was that Ellie stole the rabbit and Joel told her to put it back and she didn't. It's almost like, I mean, this is the thing, there is like such moments of humanity and normalcy in this. We've got a teenager here who's just doing what she wants. She's not listening to anybody. And the whole idea that he's having to like, no, behave yourself when they're in the bar and eating is fucking awesome. Like, no. It's this whole idea that they're both as feral as each other now. They are becoming each other.
Yeah.
Mm.
He's getting her dry sense of humor and like come what may devilry, and she's getting his skill set, and they're becoming almost not even just a unit but each other. It's like really, really lovely.
Yeah, and the way they've done it in TV, like to sort of they've obviously got to be a bit more kind of explicit in one way, because it's not just you're in there with 10 hours behind a controller, you become that person, so you can see all the like really tiny nuances. It's obviously that sort of short hour, and you're going to show other characters as well. But yeah, there's nothing I think in any of it so far that stands out as like kind of even a weird choice, let alone I think a bad choice, at least for me. I mean, there might be things that I'm sure other people can point out or where it could have been, but just kind of from my perspective, I can't think of anything that leaps out to go, oh, well, they could have done that better. It all seems to fit.
Yeah, there's nothing that takes me out of that moment and to go, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. It's all, as you say, like all flows and it's all fits together really nicely.
Even the bits that aren't in the game, like the native couple, who, can I just say, were hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, should we? I think we kind of meandered into it anyway, but should we dive into like talking in more depth about the episode, like and talk, since we're talking about immersion? So just before we come back to the native couple and everything, like bit of a brief recap for anyone. So obviously Joel and Ellie have escaped Kansas City in episode 5, losing Sam and Henry on the way, and then we pick up 3 months later. They've basically traveled across the country on foot. And then before we get to Jackson and later the university, which we feature in this episode, we meet the Native American couple whose names I didn't know in the episode, or if I did, they kind of passed me by. But when I looked it up, there it's Marlon and Florence, and they've been living obviously in that wilderness in the cabin, not since the outbreak, but since before Joel was born, as the guy put it. So that's kind of like that survivalist thing, which I guess is normal in America. Like you've just got people who you can just go up, up sticks and move out to the woods. Whereas I don't think that quite work in the UK in the same way. We're too small and kind of you wouldn't really have the same effect.
Like Sutton Park.
Like it's like the government sniffing around you. You can't do
Yeah.
anything like that at all.
No, but they were hysterical.
Mm.
They were so funny. That dry wit. Like, you didn't shoot them? Well, the gun's all the way over there. You made them soup. It's just beautifully written and beautifully delivered. I think my favourite bit in that has got to be, did you tell them the truth? Yes. Are you telling me the truth? And she waits for a second, knowing what it means, and then goes, yes. Knowing that if he gets this wrong, then he's probably going to die. She's like, yes. It was just beautiful. Just wonderful. And I want to know what was in the soup.
Yeah. I get the feeling it feels like obviously there's a lot of humor in the scene, but it also kind of speaks to the fact that, like I say, that seems to be something that seems normal in certain parts of America. People living out and like fending for themselves that way, so they're not phased by any of what happens. But also, I think that in a non-life or death situation, you know, that they've not been attacked and having to defend themselves, they're just passing through. Joel and Ellie aren't necessarily as threatening as they think.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
if you tried to sneak up on them and ambush them or whatever, all the stuff in Kansas City, then that becomes different. But I think if you just kind of pass them by and they're just sort of like, we need information, and you're like, okay, yeah, but let's have some soup, you know.
Yeah. Also, it's really so I will stop hogging this in a minute. Really interesting to me to see the absolute direct comparison with Frank and Bill. Whereas they were in a house, hunting, doing all the same things, but there was not the security, there was not the fencing, there was not the traps. They were still surviving and surviving into old age as a couple who love each other, but without all the peripheral stuff that had to be there for Bill and Frank. And you kind of begs the question, which is more civilized, which is more civilization, which is safest, which brings out your humanity more.
Yeah. Sorry, were you gonna say, I wasn't sure if I cut you off
I
before,
wasn't
Will.
sure. I wasn't.
If you were gonna say something on that point.
No, yeah, I wanted to say that. Yeah, no, I think it's probably they're in the right because they're not bringing anything to them. They're not protecting anything. They're just living their life how they've always done it. So they've not felt the need to, right, I need to build these fences and traps and everything else to protect everything. It's just they know they can survive off the land and they've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, being Native Americans, in theory, if the US government collapsed, that they're possibly safer than they've ever been in their entire lives.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
very much so.
but the other thing I think as well on that is like that kind of, we see them, and obviously saw Bill in episode 3 with Frank, and they kind of live their whole life, as you say. But we also see Jackson later on, and we're starting to get hope and hopeful situations as well, because I think obviously a lot of people associate The Last of Us, particularly part 2, but I think it's true in the first one as well, like with a lot of kind of bleak vision of humanity, and there is a lot of that. There's the Fedra fascism, you know, the jackboots, the government. There's, you know, whenever they're overthrown, people turn into savages and kind of like raiders and hunters and all this sort of stuff. But actually, we're seeing that that's not all there is. There are people who are living off the land or producing their own things, as in the case of Jackson. They're basically, you know, built up this society. They're like in the and like living cooperatively and well, as Maria explicitly puts, they've created a communist settlement. So it's something like genuinely hopeful. It's like, okay, yeah, there is life in this world. There is a way to kind of survive that doesn't involve just killing other humans and being as bad as the worst of our instincts.
Yeah. There was lots for the arseholes to get annoyed at this week, wasn't there?
Oh yeah. I as soon as that communism line was said, I was like, right, who's going to be mad online about this?
Then there was Maria. And 2 words. Moon cup.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Reminds me of that, yeah. God. It's so insane. Just
It really is.
Stuff about that.
It
The
really
most
is.
natural thing in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you would still have your period post-apocalypse, and even the whole showing how to do it and then going, ooh, gross, was just beautifully done.
Yeah. And it shows, as you say, like the hopeful, natural human emotions, because obviously, like, you wouldn't think of any of those situations happening in the world of The Last of Us, but to see those moments, it was, as you say, it's really hopeful.
Yeah. I'm crying in advance because I know what happens when we get hopeful.
Yes, very true.
I think Craig Ermaze, am I right, and Neil Druckmann have got like a hope scanner, and they go around and they're like beep 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 beep. Oh, UK, we've got hope. Let's destroy them before we get too hopeful. But I think actually it was a good choice to have Jackson instead of the dam. What do you think, Will?
No, I think so. As you say, like as we've been talking about the whole seeing these civilizations carrying on and living a completely, as you say, normal life. They've got hot water, showers, everything else. We've not seen that in any situation or any community so far, and I never really noticed it, to be honest. But as you say, like this really lovely couple at the start, and then Jackson completely this whole new society that's just carrying on. It's a complete change of pace. But as you say, like they've built us up, and then right at the very end, let's drag out another week. Let's go. Let's see this other story. Let's flash back. Let's not carry on that moment.
Yeah. One piece of advice I will give to anyone who's watching this who has seen it up to this episode but has not played the games, just wait and find out what happens. Do not Google whether Joel dies, because you will not just get spoilers for this moment. You'll get the whole thing ruined. Just leave it well enough alone.
Yeah.
Just don't touch it. Wait.
No.
All will be revealed, whether it's next episode or the episode after. Trust me on that.
Yeah, because if you put "Does Joel die in The Last of Us," you're gonna wreck it for yourself. But yeah, I agree. What I liked about Jackson as well, especially in the bar, was the fairy lights, because them fairy lights were a flex. This is like, we've not just got just about enough electricity to get by. Check out the light. Check out my drip. I got like fairy lights coming out my ass, boy. It was like, the fairy lights was a real statement. And again, I said last week about the subtleties in the writing and the direction and the staging of the whole thing.
Well,
and that to me was one of the subtleties.
Well,
they're rich and electric.
Yeah, the fairy lights are also obviously a celebration of Christmas, because that we're in that sort of time of the year, and again, perfectly normal for us. But actually, that does Christmas still get celebrated in most of the world at this point? Like 20 years after the outbreak, is that a thing that people can safely do, or is this like, the first time we've seen it, but also perhaps the first time Joel and Ellie have seen it in a long time? Being raised in a military boarding school in the middle of a quarantine zone and being a smuggler, and
it's like Ellie's comments when she's reading that diary, and she's like saying like, "Oh, thinking about what you're wearing and boys and stuff, it's completely alien to her." Just like, why would you even be thinking about that? It just really tells you like what kind of mind frame they're in. And what they've been through. Like, it's about life or death. It's whether you get to eat, whether you get to have water or whatever, not what the other boy looks
films,
like. Exactly.
Yeah. But then also that whole moment where Joel tells her that contractors were really beloved. Like, she's like, the contractors. I kind of get this idea. I love the idea maybe that there's some people who don't remember Christmas because they weren't born, and they've just had Christmas handed down to them. And there's been kind of like a telephone game in a way, like Gartic Telephone, and people have got things wrong. So they sit round in a circle and they talk about Christmases past, and they say, "Oh yes," and then the sacred goose was allowed free reign of the house, and get stuff wrong. And I love the idea that those would then become the new traditions. Well, where's the goose? We've got to let it run around the house for 3 hours. It's tradition type thing. It just makes stuff up.
Yeah. No, it's also a good question about how human are these, obviously, people in the outer society of the world, and are these people that are in Jackson like more human than the people outside? Because obviously they get to celebrate all these different things and have different thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of like sort of segue from there into some of the stuff. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Joel and a lot to talk about Joel and Ellie and all that sort of stuff. But I think talking about Christmas and Jackson and everything, celebrating, obviously, when Ellie goes round to Maria's house, we see the candle there for Sarah. That's when she learns about like the fact that Joel had a daughter, which obviously leads to the row later. But there's also for Maria's son who died, Kevin. So like we've got more of a glimpse into her past, which is again something that we've not seen anywhere else, is not fleshed out in the game. And then that sort of this idea of family lost, and then kind of feeding into Jackson as like family and traditions and life regained is obviously brought into one of the other big changes that I've not seen as much talk about compared to like whether there was a cameo for Dina in parts of it. But the big thing there, which feeds into Joel's character as well, but it's just, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff from it, is the fact that Tommy and Maria are going to have a new child. Obviously, Maria's pregnant at that point. So what do we think about that?
It really changes his decision idea, doesn't it, of whether he goes or not. But to see that how broken Joel's become, Tommy's still willing to put this new family that he's found and on the line to take Ellie. It shows how much they do still respect each other. Because obviously they had a bit of a to-do, didn't they, throughout that episode with what their choices they've made in the past and what they're going to do in the future. But it still shows that they're still very much entwined together. And
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because obviously in the game, he's sort of pretty much like, oh, right, okay, let's go. Let's do this. And then Maria's like, oh, for goodness sake. But in this, I think with the baby, it does add to that indecisiveness. And it kind of puts you in a position of whether you think he was right or wrong to say he would go. Even more so than in the game, because in the game you're like, oh, what are you doing, Tommy? You've got a life, you've got a wife, and blah blah blah. But in this, because she's pregnant, it does add weight to his decision. And yeah, I don't know that it was a choice they needed to make, but I don't think it was a choice that has detracted anything from the overall thing of the show. Having seen now that she had a child, that would make a lot more sense then for her to be replacing, not like replacing is a horrible word, but we hear about rainbow children when one's died and then they have another one and that's their little miracle then. So the idea of what am I trying to say? The idea of her having lost a child makes it more important, I would have thought, for Tommy to stay. So that adds extra, because he would know how important this baby is to Maria. So that makes him saying he would go and take Ellie rather than Joel. That adds weight to that part of the decision as well.
Yeah.
I felt sorry. I mean, Gabrielle Luna was amazing, but I felt really sorry for Tommy in that moment.
Yeah, it feeds into a lot of his character as well, because we've kind of seen him like always kind of chasing these causes, and like he's was a Desert Storm vet, and then he joined the Fireflies because he believed that was the right thing to do. And then as he kind of left them, he's now got the Jackson, and kind of he's immersed himself in like believing in a community, even to the point where he cut off the communication with Joel to keep the community safe. But again, because the reason, like, I think that turned his decision wasn't just that kind of he was pushed into it, but I think Joel's reaction to the news wasn't just like he was cold to it. It was kind of like Tommy's moved on. Tommy's trying to like rebuild his life and do all this sort of thing. Joel can't do that. Joel's still to the point where mentioning another child, he's having these panic attacks and call back to Sarah and that. Like to the point he can't even be happy for his brother having a child, like just because it's still that raw 20 years later.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, and then obviously we see the kind of because of the fear he has for Ellie, like, and everything else, like when he's that monologue he gives when he's trying to fix his shoe and he gets given new boots and kind of just explains a lot of the stuff there. Again, it's from Tommy's point of view. That's his chance still. He's still being that hero in some way, like, and it kind of he still wants to defend Jackson and be part of Jackson, but it's also like he needs to do this for his big brother's falling apart, and he needs to do something in there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if this is going too deep, but the whole boots thing, when he was trying to fix the old boots, and he knew he could just get new ones. He knew they've got like an over surplus amount of clothing and what have you. They've already told him this. Ellie's now got her fucking purple coat. It's aubergine. But it's sort of almost like the old boots represented Sarah and the new boots represented Ellie. Like, your old boots cannot be used anymore. You've got to let them go and take on the new boots. So then that way he's going, no, and he's like, no, I don't want your new boots. I want my old boots. Well, you can't have your old boots. They're fucked, mate. He's like,
Yeah, they were gone.
yeah,
Well and
totally
truly.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're having to like duct tape them together to keep the sole on, then get rid of them. Even I've
Right?
never let a pair of shoes go that far.
But I have to say, babe, if I was pregnant and we were in the apocalypse and you was going off to help Paul, your brother, do something instead, like, you'd be sleeping on the sofa.
I shall bear that in mind.
I mean, we know full well from the game how Maria reacts to it, but we didn't really see it in the show, did we?
Yeah, no, because he says he's not
He
going
does
to tell her,
say.
and there's like there's a look traded between them when they're in the
Mm,
in the I forgot the word then, in the cinema when they're watching the film.
yeah.
And there's the sort of, you can see everything in Maria's face of just like fucking Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just so cold, wasn't it? The way he looked over and then just like turned away. It was like,
Yeah.
I know what you've done.
Yeah. But yeah, the boots to me were an allegory. That's the word I was looking for, of Ellie and Sarah. And then when he saw Sarah, or saw the young woman who looks like Sarah from the back with a child, because I think what we forget with he lost his daughter is he also lost the potential for grandchildren. He
Very true.
lost the chance to be Grandpa Joel.
Mm.
And he's 50 odd. So he could quite happily be Grandpa Joe at this age. So he's lost all that as well. No wonder he's having panic attacks.
Yeah.
So,
What did you feel about the panic attacks and the sort of moments and everything from I mean, we talk about how it affects Tommy, like kind of his decisions, but from Joel's perspective and his character, like this kind of choice that they've got in.
I think it really shows us the amount of weight all the decisions he's had to make, and I think the whole Ellie being immune and having to take her to the Fireflies to get this cure and save humanity. I think it's now the weight of that is really kicking in, and that's what's triggering him. Is that all these situations with every new people they meet, even though they've met really nice people this episode, like I can't imagine what Joel would be like now if he met another bad group of people with Ellie. Well, we've just seen that, but to see the outcome and see how that moves on. But yeah, I think that's probably why.
Yeah, and we're kind of the gap between kind of how people perceive Joel and what he may have done in the past and where he's at now seems to be growing wider as well. Because I mean, he makes that kind of comment of like, if I was 5 years younger, when he's talking about the kid in Kansas City snuck upon him, he said, if I was 5 years younger, I would have destroyed him, which is kind of Easter eggy in one sense because he's 5 years older than the game version of Joel, who does go around and like murders everybody with ease. But there's also that thing of like we've seen a lot of people talk about Joel, like from like how afraid Robert was of him in like the first episode, and like saying to Tess, please don't tell him about this, and kind of when she had to
even
calm him
Maria did it.
down.
Maria said it to Ellie this week. Like, do you know what he's done?
Yeah, well, that's it. There's an image of him and that, all that sort of thing, and we'll talk about it more when we get into future spoilers later, because I think part of this comes into like a lot of the foreshadowing that's been happening as well. But I think as well, like that being set up is part of the thing where he's at this point again, like with the arguments that they had where kind of Ellie and Joel's relationship built to a point and then seemed to be breaking apart. Joel is kind of reaching a like lower point where he's like feeling like he can't do the things he needs to do to protect, and obviously he's not what he was and what everyone thinks he is. Obviously, where that goes in the future is a question that remains unresolved at this point.
Can I, if I may, bring it back to episode 1 or 2, the bit where Joel beats up and kills the Fedra agent, the Fedra guy, when they're just trying to escape from the quarantine zone. It's just occurred to me that not only we've said he's got PTSD, and rightly so. It's the only reasonable response to the situations he's been through. But when he stood in front of the soldier, when he had Sarah in his arms, when she'd broken her leg, he didn't fire on him, and he could have. So the fact that he then kills the Fedra agent who's threatening Ellie shows, I think, I'm not sure what it shows. I'm not sure if it shows his PTSD kicking in, if it shows him actually finally getting that action right, or if it shows the fact that he was protective in a fatherly way right from the beginning and just didn't want to admit it.
Possibly some mixture, I suspect.
Hmm.
I think he's making that right decision, isn't he? Like, he knows he's trying to make up for it, redeem himself. Like, no,
Yeah.
I've got to actually
Yeah.
go to this level.
Yeah, because it's like the first time he stands there and he goes, "Oh no, we're not a threat, we're not sick, blah 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 blah." Whereas Addy got just gone boof. But that's not who he was then yet, is it?
No.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. There are lots of different Joels, like you saying about the Joel he was and the Joel he's becoming. We also have like the Joel he was before the Joel he was.
Yeah, and now that you've said that, it kind of feels like a bit of a regression as well, because we got that moment, obviously, with the patrol from Jackson and they surround him, and he says this later, like where he froze up and he couldn't do anything, where there was a potential the dog was going to tear Ellie apart, and it's almost the same moment. He's confronted by some sort of patrol and he freezes up and he can't do anything, and luckily this time it turned out okay, but it's almost, I suspect that the way they met there was a deliberate choice in some senses. With that, was because it's a reflection of that moment with Sarah. It's that over again, but a different outcome, and it's
it's also a reflection of that moment with the Fedra guy at the QZ, because the big thing is, will they find out Ellie's infected? And Ellie had that same look of terror on her face when she thought the dog was going to rip her apart, but it wasn't so much about ripping her apart, it was about finding out she was immune. So when the Fedra guy found out she was immune and then Joel killed him, that was a slightly different outcome to when he thought the dog was going to rip her apart. But with that dog moment, Ellie is still absolutely terrified that her secret's going to be found out. I don't think it's even death that she's worried about then.
No, I think it's a sense of control as well for Joel.
Yeah.
Because he had, in that moment with the Fedra, he had the control of that situation. He could make the outcome of the situation what he wanted. Whereas in that situation, he's surrounded. There's a dog. Like, he can't lie his way out of it. He can't shoot his way out of it. He's at the mercy of this decision. Is that dog got to sniff and find it? If he does, they're screwed. And that's it. He's just accepted his fate and just gone, look, I can't do anything. And that's his body now making that
Mm.
Yeah. Poor love. You should have him round for his tea.
Um, so I'm just kind of thinking back to where we are. So there's from that. I mean, from Joel's stuff, we've got like obviously all his fears and insecurities about Ellie, which reflects like him regaining his fears from that he had with Sarah, and it kind of like reflects that thing that Bill said is like he was never afraid before he met Frank. It's all that sort of thing. Like once you're caring for someone, there's that fear again, and it like how it affects. Almost like it all thematically loops together, and it's all been written in a really coherent way that kind of keeps building layers upon layers.
Imagine.
Yeah.
But I like the way they did the resolution to the conflict, like that Joel's internal conflict, and also the conflict that he had with Ellie, where he was like, you know, you've got to go with Tommy because I can't protect you. And like in the game version of that, he was a lot more guarded about why he was trying to pass off. He was obviously the same reasons he was scared, but he was kind of like, you know, even with Tommy, it was more coming to blows than him breaking down. And then with Ellie, he obviously has that thing where he's like, you know, you're not my daughter, I'm not your dad. And then he kind of relents because they're out away from town, and then on the ride back, he then says, "Ellie, give him the horse. We'll go back." And he kind of makes this up of saying, "Well, you know, that wife of yours kind of scares me. I don't want, so I'll don't want to get you killed. I'll take her." Whereas in this, he comes in the morning and he says he was trying to steal the horse to go away, but then he's like, "Well, you should have the choice." And then immediately Ellie just goes, I'm going with you.
Right, we ready? Off we go.
And it just again, like it felt just I don't know what the right word is. I'm doing that a lot today. Just like there was a thing. I don't have a word to describe it. Whatever the word is, it's escaped me. But yes, it was definitely a thing.
Well, it was a really thinking episode, wasn't it? With the whole difference of vibe in the whole episode. It's really made us. It's complete. It sort of like suctioned us out of that moment of where we've been in the past. Those 5 episodes coming up to it, and now it's a new setting, and you can really tell like it's now starting after these. The last 2 are really going to be, where it really ramps up.
Can't believe there's only 2 left.
Well, we've got.
How is there only 2 left? 2 or 3, isn't it?
Yeah,
we've got 3. We've got the Left Behind one, and then
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh God, it's Left Behind next week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready for Left Behind. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I mean, before we come on to that, like just to kind of round this, I think when you said that as well, like some of different setting, it was also like all the other episodes. There was a building tension waiting for, and then like that tension broke because they got out of it or whatever happened, and they like the next thing happened and so on. Whereas it felt like this one, they kind of stripped the tension away to a degree. The threat was gone. They were in the town. And then it was all emotional stuff. Joel was able to deal with his feelings and all this sort of stuff. And then once they made the choice, like, so the episode's book ended with those traveling montages where they're together and there's like the banter, like Ellie at the start, Ellie's talking about like dreams of being an astronaut and stuff. And then at the end, Joel's kind of like obviously doing the contractor thing, and then they shoot and practice, and he tells her that he wants to be a singer. And it's like, feels like it's going quite well, and then all of a sudden the Raiders at the end, and like they're just, and obviously that ending as well, so it's just kind of like, well, yeah, it was all very emotional and like there was a lot to resolve, but there was no threat, or was there?
Well, there was, because I was still on edge, right? Not just because I knew what was coming, but because every time it seems to be going well, I'm always guarded. And I think that's I think it's so clever because, like, the characters in this, if you're in this apocalypse, even when things seem to be going well, you're still going to be feeling a bit guarded, aren't you? Yeah. Constantly looking over your shoulder like, oh, is it actually all right? Like, or I'm keeping one eye on the door type thing. And that's how I feel watching this. Though I did like the contractor. That was
No, it feels like we've been slowly drowning, getting deeper and deeper emotionally all the way through. This episode, they've pulled us out, let us have a breath, and then they've gone, no, get back in there. And then here's some added weight. There you go. Have that last 2 episodes. Boom.
It's like we've been watching a lot of Supernatural, so it's like head in the toilet.
Yeah,
you're all right
again.
now. Is that okay? Like, no, I'm not ready.
No.
No, I'm not. The thing is, much like last week, I'm not ready for the next one, but I'm not ready for it to be over either. I'm like, can we have I'd be real annoyed if there was a 6-week break now, because I'd be like, oh God, I've got to wait 6 weeks. But then I'm kind of like, can you just give us a bit of proper fucking respite? I would love to see what neurotypes these people are. I mean, I'm thinking sadists would feature in there quite heavily.
Oh yeah.
Because fucking hell. Do you think they sit together like having breakfast and shit and going like, no, that's not going to break them enough. Oh, how about this? Yeah, that'll do it. And what about if we have this? Yeah, even better. It's bastards. My lovable bastards, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about almost everything there. I mean, obviously at the end, what happens with the attack and the Raiders is very quick compared to, I mean, for reasons that I think make perfect sense, like having Joel have to fight his way out through like 20 odd guys in a firefight down a long corridor, only to then like be thrown off a balcony and like his side pierced with a long piece of rebar, and then have to pull it out and kind of shuffle the way forward through fighting more guys. I think would stretch the bounds of belief as far as the TV show goes in the world that they've set up. That sort of moment of it was like the end of like the broken end of the baseball bat or something, wasn't it? Or was it it was
the handle had snapped off and got into him.
Because that's still gonna give you that like absolutely horrible injury there and like leave him in the state he did without it being like this superhuman feat to still be breathing by the end of it.
Yeah, no, the trauma that he would have suffered falling from that height onto that rebar and then being pulled off and dragged off there, he'd be dead.
Yeah.
So they've had to give that a bit more of a, as you say, like more of a believable situation.
Well, I'm going to say it irritates me, right? Because obviously you'd think as a contractor that Joel would have had some health and safety and first aid training, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? You'd think that like on a building site, safety first, hard hats, like everybody knows their way around the first aid kit. But what's the first thing they do always when they're impaled or stabbed by something? Oh, pull it out. No, you don't pull it out. You bloody leave it in there, because a lot of the time, right, and Phil's laughing because I say it every single time to the telly.
It's true. Every time this happens in any TV show or film.
It drives me mad. It's more dangerous to pull it out because then you're bleeding, the blood has got somewhere to go. You're plugging it up. It's fine. Leave it where it is until you can get medical attention. But do they listen? No. They pull it out, start bleeding to death. And then they go, oh, that'll be infected. Yes, it will, because you've been riding around with your jacket rubbing on it and all the dirt and shit going in it. It keeps it clean, leaving it in there as well. It's not like the bits are going to go, ooh, and all around your blood. Oh, don't. Drives me mad. Every time. I only did first aid in the workplace, and I know better than that. Run over.
So that was your, for me, like the thing that completely ruined the episode and pulled me out and made me go, oh no, this is barely a 5 out of 10, was the horse bit prop being a prop. For you, it's like, oh, he pulled the thing out. Worst episode ever.
It drives me mad. It drives me mad because you think in universe he should know. it's not even a case. See, you're gonna have to shut me up, babe, because I will go on.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not even that he wouldn't know. In universe, he would know better than to do it.
Okay. Well, at this point, imagine I'm just sort of like patting you on the head. You know, I know it's okay. It's fine.
It's all right.
We all know.
Leave it in there.
So is there? I'm trying to think if there's any other big moments in the episode. I mean, after that, obviously, we get the like kind of Ellie's last monologue to Joel before the like. I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that they pulled out and like the horse being a prop aside. I think if they'd cut to black, it probably would have had a much bigger impact in that moment as well, like than the kind of that thing. But that's like a minor nitpick. But again, the lines that she says about like not knowing where she's going and not knowing what to do, like it is an expansion of like that. But again, like that was delivered really well, and that speaks to, because I think that's the big thing we haven't really talked about is Ellie's characterization in all this. Like, because we talked about Joel, we talked about Tommy, but Ellie's kind of, because at the core of her arguments with Joel earlier on, it calls back to the conversation that she had with Sam and like a big fear of being left alone. And then it's happening at the end of this episode, and like, you know, Joel is leaving her now and she doesn't know what to do. It's the whole thing stems from this. Whenever there's anything, like any person who might be a constant in her life, it's taken away from her. Which we will find more out about next week. But yeah, that kind of I thought was a nice callback as far as that conversation to the argument that they had earlier as well.
Yeah. It's Bella Ramsey. What can we say about them? Apart from they are incredible and deserve everything. Because people are talking about Pedro Pascal's performance, but Bella Ramsey's is just as good as, if not better. The whole anger, the whole everybody leaves me, dies or leaves me, and then continue and just loses the shit. That nearly had me in tears, where Joel talking about his dream so much didn't, though that was really quite moving as well. I have this dream and I wake up and I failed her. I'm failing. And that was, but Bella Ramsey as Ellie has just been pitch perfect, I think, all the way through.
Yeah. I liked quite a lot of her moments where obviously it's like when they first saw the monkeys and stuff. Like even in this world, they're having those normal sort of father-daughter moments where obviously she's taking it to the zoo and seeing these animals for the first time in the wild and everything else. It's quite nice moments, split all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah. First time seeing a monkey.
First time being in a car. First time seeing a monkey. It's like, yeah. And I love that she doesn't lose that naivety. She's seen some awful, awful things. But at the root of it all, she's still a kid who's never seen a monkey before. And she doesn't seem to lose that. I am a bit disappointed that she didn't regale Jackson with puns from the pun book. That needs to come back. But yeah, I love the fact that she is still childlike, because she is essentially still a child.
Yeah.
And yeah. Breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But knowing what's coming as well, it sort of makes all that's happened in this episode. It's difficult to talk about this episode. You'd think it wasn't, from the amount we've been talking. But it's difficult to talk about this episode because we know how much foreshadowing there is.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Well, we'll jump into that in a sec, I think, and we'll talk spoilers. But just before we do, I was going to ask if there's anything else anyone wants to bring up about like any of the bits that we've seen. I think we've covered most things. The only thing I want to mention very briefly on the monkey subject, and this is just a PSA if you ever find yourself caught in an apocalypse, because I don't think they really touched on it as much there. Like, because like in the game, you find out that the monkeys were being experimented on in the Firefly's efforts to find a vaccine, and I don't think they spell that out at any point in the show, from memory. But the reason they know this is because they find like the dictaphone of a doctor who was doing it, and like as they'd all packed up and left to move to the Salt Lake City outpost, he'd decided to let the monkeys go free and got bitten and become infected as a result. So if there is any kind of apocalypse which is a viral outbreak and you come across animals, you don't want to make friends with them. They may be infected, they may bite you, it may be your end. You've been warned.
But why friend shape if not friend?
This is how people like go into like tiger enclosures and get their face bitten off, or how Harambe happened, and
See, it's like in like 30 years' time in the same sort of situation as The Last of Us. And people go, so how did it start? Well, there was this gorilla.
yeah. But other than lessons about leaving animals well alone, is there anything else we want to talk about in the episode before we go into like future spoilers territory?
No, I think this episode was more of a breather, wasn't it? It was sort of a let's take it slow, let's recover, let's get through to the next point, and then obviously the end of the episode drops it on us, doesn't it? But it was quite nice to see that difference in tempo and pace, and
almost like it was. Sorry, Will, you were saying.
Oh no, it's all right. Now finish.
Almost like it was a cutscene.
All right.
I'm just saying. It's almost like the entire episode was a cutscene, giving you that time to breathe before the action takes off again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we're going to talk about what we're looking forward to, what's coming up in episode 7 and potentially 8 and 9. So this section will contain spoilers for the game and potential spoilers for future episodes of the show. So if you're not familiar with the game at all, and this will all potentially ruin the show for you, then check the timestamps in the description to skip forward to avoid all this, because it's better to experience it yourself. Obviously, once you have, you can come back and watch this video again because you'll be so compelled to join in the discussion. But until then, timestamps will help you skip forward. So, Left Behind is coming up next episode. And obviously, we know at the least that that's going to focus on the flashbacks between Ellie and Riley and what happens between them. I don't know we don't know whether it'll include anything in the present, like the way the Left Behind DLC did. Obviously, it had kind of flashing between the two. I think it's probably unlikely, and anyone who doesn't know that Joel survives will probably be left hanging on till episode 8 to find that out, unless there's some sort of framing story. I'm not 100% sure which way they'll go with that. I hope there is, because I don't want them to drag out the potential of Joel being dead too long, because I feel like that will ruin when... I did say there was going to be spoilers for the future, so when Joel actually dies in season 2, I think having the fake out, that was one of the reasons I think that Glenn's death in Walking Dead didn't have as much impact as it could have, or it pissed people off and had people leaving the show and stuff, is because there was that huge fake out for like 3 episodes or something beforehand. So I hope there's at least something that demonstrates that yes, he is alive, and albeit badly wounded. But anyway, that's kind of just my opinion on that bit. But what are we... So, I mean, this is obviously a chance. Anything you want to talk about this episode in terms that reference spoilers and talk about foreshadowing and stuff, but also what your feelings are about what's coming up?
I think in regards to what's coming up is that I find quite a lot of the all these emotional moments that we're having, it's more raw and it's a lot more emotional, I think, for how it's coming across. So seeing the huge decisions being made in, like, obviously the last episode it's going to be, just seeing how much impact that has, because obviously the way Joel is now, seeing him having to make that final decision, see whether it's going to be so hard or so easy for him to make that decision. I think that's what's intriguing me the most.
I think it's going to be really easy for him to make that decision.
Yeah.
In the last episode, I think it's going to be. I think this is it. This is where the episode we had Monday, is where he made that decision essentially,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
the decision was that he would protect Ellie at all costs.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think when he gets to making the decision, it's already been made.
Yeah,
I
considering
really
how
do.
broken he was at that choice, and he's now fully committed to it. I think
Yeah.
he's very much ready to have his life on the line. I think at that moment, if he had
Yeah.
to lose his life to get there, I think he's just like, yeah, if I'm going, I'm going now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're also going to see we've seen that point where the action has been more realistic and more grounded, and obviously they're not able to kind of fight off as many people as you would in a video game. But I think we're also going to see that point where Joel effectively becomes like the mother who lifts the car off a like child who's crushed underneath. He's going to pull that from somewhere within himself, because it's still the Fireflies are still a paramilitary organization, and they're still holding, at that point, presumably it's going to be broadly the same. He'll have an unconscious Ellie ready to operate on her, which will kill her, and he's going to pull all that out, and we're going to see exactly what Robert was afraid of, exactly what Tess tried to restrain, exactly what Maria kind of is worried about from the story she's heard from Tommy, exactly what haunts Tommy in the back of it. All of that stuff is that Joel is going to come back at that moment. That's my kind of prediction for it.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. But all the way through this, we've had him like, oh, I shot this guy, or I didn't quite shoot this guy, or I should have done this, or I'd have finished him off 5 years ago, blah, blah, blah. He is literally just going to be like, the old Joe that was with Tess, the Joe before he met Ellie, is coming back, and I am for it. I'm like so excited to see it. It's going to be like, don't get in his way, because I don't care how well trained you are as a paramilitary. This is a dad. Dad squad! Dad squad!
I think that's a testament to the writing as well, because at any moment they could put in a sort of a gameplay sort of sequence where he's taking out loads of them, but every single situation he's been in, he's almost come to death, and he's only taken on one, maybe two.
Yeah.
So to then have that moment, as you say, at the very end, where we're going to see this whole takedown of loads of people, it's going to give what the people who want that kind of raw gameplay sort of feel of Joel. And then also we've got the TV Joel as well. I think that's when it's going to come together.
And I think because I have my other prediction is because we've had this indecisive, racking his brains, feeling his emotions, like I'm in my feels at the moment, Joel. I think that when he does go back to like as Dre said, you're gonna like fuck around with me and turn me back to the old me. It's not going to feel fan servicey.
No.
Because we had in Game of Thrones, we had Clegane Bowl, and it was like, oh, for goodness sakes, like nothing good came from that. But this won't, I have a feeling, feel fan servicey, because we've had this build up, this progression.
Yeah, and it fits with it's his character arc, where it's like it's not just like completely going back on the character arc to like fulfill a meme or whatever. It's this is where the story's been heading the whole time. We've had every bit of foreshadowing from like from that moment with the soldier, from what Bill's letter, and like that's why men like us exist. All the stuff with Henry and Sam, all the kind of people you trust, only the people you trust can betray you. Every bit of foreshadowing that's coming, it's all been building up to that, and it's that moment. It's basically when you find out that you've kidnapped the person you've kidnapped is related to Liam Neeson. it's that oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, or that dog you accidentally killed belonged to John Wick.
John Wick.
It's that moment of, oh, fuck.
Yeah. It's like, shit. That dad squad's coming to get you. It's like, could be there in his flannel with his gun. Like, but then I think, like, after he makes his choice and takes Ellie out, when she asks him that question at the end, now knowing that she's had all these conversations and she knows who old Joel is, that's gonna add extra like friction, extra tension to that question.
Mm.
Because she will know that actually there is a part of Joe that's capable of
Yeah.
not being the calm thing and oh they said this that, and the other, no, and she'll know that actually that may not be how it went down.
Yeah, because that's what I mean. I've seen a lot of people saying that they're gonna like. I don't think it's like based on anything in the show, but I think people, particularly people who aren't necessarily fans of part 2, like theorizing that they're going to change it to make Joel more unsympathetic in that moment and all this sorts of stuff, which doesn't really fit anyway because obviously they've softened him up a huge bit, so he's arguably more sympathetic than he was in the game. But as well, like I think the thing that when people are saying that they're going to make it so it's obvious that Joel was in the wrong and like Ellie wanted this and all this sort of stuff. If they did that, which I don't think for a minute they will, but if they did that, that would undercut everything that like kind of makes the following story out, because there's a whole tension where Ellie doesn't know. She suspects that Joel's lied, but she doesn't know for certain that he's lied. And then
And
she
as
finds
is-
out, and then that's the cause of the conflict between them. Once she finds out after all those years, he's continued to lie to her, and then obviously that conflict between them is unresolved when he dies, which leads on to everything else that happens in part 2. And so, yeah, I think.
Well, she's made her choice. This is the thing. She made her choice. You should get to choose. Right, let's go. And she knows who he is. She knows what he's capable of.
Mm.
She's seen what he's capable of. She watched him beat a man to death. Right back from day one.
Yeah.
She knows who he is, and that's who she chose.
Mm.
So the whole idea that she should get, I think had he told her the truth, she'd have been pissed. But she'd have got over it. I think it is the lying, because she knows who he is.
Yeah.
And she still chose him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we are going to get basically the exact same ending. And I think,
Yeah,
it's, as you say, it's probably going to have a lot more impact. But we're still that's the
We've still
3
got
episodes
stuff.
away. We've still got stuff before then as well.
Yeah.
Left Behind. Oh my days. I cannot wait for the internet fart brigade to be complaining that it's turned into a chick flick.
Yeah. All the people who are like, oh no, it's not the same as the games, showing the fact that they haven't played the games by being outraged by something which was already in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, why do we need to see it? Ugh. Like, why do we need to see moon cups? Ugh. Lady bits, like, tell me you've never had sex and move on. Like,
Oh God.
yeah, I can't wait because I just sit back and laugh at these people. But I think it's going to be lovely. I have a feeling it's going to be just as intense, just as heartbreaking, and there's going to be those moments of pure joy.
Yeah. Can I potentially ruin your life for a bit with one point though? Like, you know, when she shoots the kid and then she later says it's not her first time. Obviously the first time was Riley, but we never see in the game it ended after they've been bitten and Ellie's kind of got her head in her hands and it cuts to black, cuts to credits. We may see more. We may see the moment where she has to shoot Riley.
Well, this is, I mean, I don't
know
know
whether we definitely will, but just I think brace
I don't-
yourself.
I don't know if you realise what we're watching, but this is like The Last of Us, so I'm assuming my heart's going to be pulled out my chest and stomped on.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
I think they'll show it.
yeah, I
Definitely.
think they will.
But just
Yeah.
if you're thinking, oh well, I've built up a tolerance to heartbreak now. I can weather this storm.
I know I
Just-
can't. I know I can't. I know I'm going to be a weeping mess. Just keep the biscuits on hand and we'll be
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, I know I'm going to be a weeping mess because we're going to get to see her first kiss. And it's just going to be so lovely and so tender and so awkward. What I remember from watching you play the DLC is they were just so teenager and so awkward with each other. And I like you. Do you like me? I don't know. Do you like me? I like you. It's like there is bad, and I remember what that's like because like when we were getting married, I was almost when they were like, "Do you take this woman?" I thought I was nearly like, "Yeah, but as a friend, yeah." It's we're terrible like that, and I'm making a case for Ellie to be neurodivergent. I think she's neurodivergent. She's not very good with tone or socialization, even though she's grown up around other kids at the Fedra boot camp. And I'm also going to put my case for Ellie being a top because she goes nowhere without her backpack. If you know, you know. The lesbians will get it.
Again, I can't speak to any of that.
Yeah, Ellie's a top. She's never without a backpack. But yeah, I think it's just going to be gloriously awkward, and I can't wait. And about you, Will, are you going to survive and
I don't know
endure?
this, right? I know I'm going to have to, but I think what I'm looking forward to is seeing the people who haven't played the game see how they view Joel after the end and see whether they're with him or not. I think that's going to be the huge question
Yeah,
at the end.
absolutely. I think are we having David stuff?
David
we
is
are.
at episode 9, so
9,
that's where
ooh.
you see the David stuff, which is where again I think I've made the case that I'm really looking forward to this because I want them to do that moment where Ellie and David fight and she has to sneak around because I think that would be like given how much of a lead they've leaned into the horror, I think that would be sublimely terrifying.
Yeah,
Having to do that because it's obviously it's not a gameplay sequence. Then it's not a boss. It's a child hiding from an adult who has really horrible intentions towards like that. I think that's got the potential to just be heart in your throat kind of moments at TV.
I'm looking forward to seeing her like turn his face into mincemeat, and Joel have to pull her off.
Yeah,
Because it's kind of like the opposite. It's a reflection of Joel beating up the Fedra bloke.
Also
very
because
true.
Troy Baker plays David's right hand man James, we get to see Ellie kill Joel in the game.
I can't wait to see Troy Baker.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah. Oh, that's a question as well. Ashley Johnson plays Anna, Ellie's mother. So, do we think we'll see that next week when they're doing full flashbacks? Because it looks like from the previews that it won't start right at where Left Behind started in the game. It'll start a bit before that and show some of her time in Fedra and military school. So, do we think we'll see the mother cameo in that,
together,
or do we think we'll see that? They'll save that for like episode 9 when she's like facing death and Marlene's making the decision to sacrifice her because we know from the games that Anna and Marlene were friends. So, which one do we reckon is more likely?
I reckon the end. I think that the whole moment, the whole pinnacle of the show at the very end. I think they're going to add so much weight to that, and I think that would be probably the best moment to make that because it's involving everyone in the situation.
Yeah. I mean, Marlene's making decisions. It's all about decisions, isn't it? The whole thing is about love and decisions. And Marlene's making a decision too. And Marlene knows Ellie. And Marlene knew Ellie's mum. And yeah, and to be able to, so she's become like a surrogate mum for Ellie, and for her to make the one decision and for the surrogate dad to make a different one, that tension is yeah, you're right, that writing wise, story arc wise, that's the best place to put it. Yeah. Though, yeah, I'd quite like to see a bit where we've got the two Ellies in the same shot. That would be quite cool. But that would be fan service, and we've
Yeah.
already had the Game Bowl. We don't need this.
She died pretty much at childbirth or pretty soon after, so we're not going to. I mean, we'll see two Ellies together, but it'll be the baby who plays baby Ellie rather than.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like they could have done this whole if my mother was still around and have a fantasy shot, but it would be shit. So let's not do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I don't think we're at risk of that.
No, I don't think they will. But I'm tired, so my mind is racing and doing strange things. But yeah, I think that having Anna there when Marlene is making her choice
Yeah.
would, yeah. I just think there's going to be lots of like Leo moments from here on. Yeah.
Cool. So, any other things that we want to talk about in before we kind of bring an end to the spoiler discussion?
Why is Ellie, if they do the David bit the same as they did in the game, that was the one thing I couldn't get my head round with the game, is why I know it's kind of like they're thrown together by circumstance, and he's like, oh well, if we stick together, blah blah blah, we both got guns, blah blah. But the idea that Ellie would trust David for a second,
Yeah. So
to me, was the thing that stood out, and I went,
yeah. So I mean, the way it happens in there is like she's chasing the buck, the stag, like after she hunts it, and then David and James appear, and she like holds them hostage and takes like David's rifle off him, and then like they're holding while James goes to get the penicillin that she's going to use for Joel, and then that's when the infected start, and they kind of have to fight and everything else, and then afterwards, like because they've done all that, she eases up a little bit, but then David reveals that he knows exactly who she is and that he's been tracking her and Joel for quite a while because of what they did, and they killed the men at the university, and that's where she then kind of runs back and everything goes from there.
yeah.
So again, with the way they've been doing it, I don't think we'll see that same situation in terms of a fight and anything, but we might see a kind of having to hole up and fortify against the infected or some sort of sequence.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but even that's what I mean in the game. Even though they have to fight together, it's necessity that throws them together. There is still, I felt that Ellie still trusted him to look after her too much in that moment. Just a personal thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Ellie that I was playing didn't. I kept using him as a human shield, so when the clickers grabbed him, it stabbed him.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. But David is terrifying when he's got Ellie on his own.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with that. I think that will be probably the most wear your brown trousers to that episode of television.
Yeah. Shit your pants and die.
Don't do that.
That's a thing now.
It is a thing now. It is a thing now. Oh,
I think that brings us to an end with everything that we can discuss there. So, if with all that said, before we wrap up, finally, if you want to give a quick mention of where people can find you, and if there's anything particular you want to plug, now is the time to do so.
You can find me everywhere, pretty much as Resident Evil Central. Obviously, we've got the Game Flavour Food thing coming up, but then also after The Last of Us is just finished, we've obviously got Resident Evil 4 Remake. releasing, so that's a quite a nice timing to drop, not in between the Last of Us show. That's quite nice. So it'd be quite nice to dive straight into that after. So obviously there's going to be a lot of coverage of that. So if you're looking forward to any of that, definitely follow us.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to that as well. That game is easily the most anticipated game of the year for me.
Oh god,
I
yeah.
can never remember, as Phil knows, I can never remember which ones are which. So, is this the one with the little pirate dude?
Yes,
Yes.
Ramon Salazar.
That's so I feel like the first time I called him little pirate dude, he was like, who? What the fuck are you talking about? It's just like little pirate dude. There's big trilby bloke. I know which one he's in. He's so, but there's so many, and I've seen Phil play them all, and they kind of meld into one type of thing. So if it's got little pirate dude, it's also got, is it Ashley who gets on my nerves?
Yeah. Leon, help!
Because she sounds like Penelope Pitstop. Help! Just drives me up the wall. So yeah, okay. So the remake of that's coming out.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm looking forward to it too.
And they've changed Ashley so she's not annoying. So.
Well, that yeah. I mean, what have they done? Zipped her mouth up. Like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping they've taken out the line about the ballistics as well.
Oh, they have, and the internet, or the corner of the internet that's never had sex is not happy.
No.
But
like I say, tell me you've never had sex and move on. You can find me on ducktapeenddaddyissues.blogspot.com. That's where my sex blogging is.
Not suitable for work, I should say. If anyone don't log into that on your work
I
computer.
was about to say that. I'm on Goddess Diva on Mastodon and on Twitter and pretty much everywhere, on Instagram as well. And generally, I am to be found crying over my next literary review that needs to be done for my PhD. But yeah, or you can find me making Animal Crossing islands for Phil. I've got to do another one for you now. I've sorted my island out, so
I'm sure we can think of something.
should I do a Last of Us island for you?
I'm not sure how you'd make the mushrooms like spooky enough, but maybe.
Because now, before when I did your Resident Evil one, and I said I didn't have the horrible bare trees for Lady Dimitrescu's like courtyard. I've got them now. So yeah, I can do something. I'll do you a Last of Us island.
Well, there we go. You heard it here first. Something to look forward to on the channel. So, thank you once again to my guests, and make sure you do check out the links in the description and show them some support and love. If you've enjoyed the podcast, give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. If you could, the last 3 episodes of this podcast as we near the finale, all the videos on The Last of Us, Resident Evil, and horror gaming, and my live streams where I am still trying to beat Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 on whole game permadeath. So check out the links in the description to join my Patreon for as little as £1 per month, or donate to my GoFundMe and get your name in the credits of my videos, like those at the end of this video, who I want to thank for supporting me and my content. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.